You're listening to Two Guys Talking Wine with Michael Pincus and André Prue.
Michael.
André, these are good chicken fingers.
Yeah, we're really going high class today.
Wow, you pulled out the appetizers. Usually you don't.
Yeah, you're right. I'm a terrible host.
There's no dipping sauce, though.
What do you want to dip it in?
I don't know. Like a plum sauce or a sweet and sour sauce or a... Look, I've been in Italy for a long time.
Oh, you need some trash. You've been eating too good and healthy.
I need trashy sauces. They don't have trashy sauces there. Everything starts with a roux, and next thing you know, you've got sauce.
Before we get into the nitty gritty of this episode, patreon.com/2guystalkingwine. Doesn't take a whole lot to keep this podcast going, but like I said the last episode, we know we've got a few hundred people who listen to every episode of this show. It doesn't take a lot, like a couple bucks. We'll be happy with $2 or $3 a month. It really does go a long way to making sure we can keep things going, pay the hosting costs, etc. And that's all I'm going to say about that, because you know what? We're going to be starting every episode like this until we get 5 new monthly subscribers.
It keeps the lights on.
And if you're sick of hearing my voice talk about it, if you subscribe, it'll stop. 5 more subscribers. That's all we're looking for.
Blackmail is a wonderful thing.
It's not blackmail. It's just a shakedown. So, who are we talking to this week?
Well, let me finish my chicken finger for a second. I just poured you a wonderful glass of 2010 Chateau Fontenil.
You did. It's delicious.
Now, man gets a lot of, let's say he's had a lot of bad press. But if you can read the bottom of that bottle.
Oh, here we go. So, Chateau Fontenil from Michel Rolland.
So this is his home vineyard. This is where in Fronsac, which obviously is part of Bordeaux. And we are talking today to his wife, Dany Rolland.
Okay.
Whom we've done a little bit of teasing over the last few weeks that we were going to talk to her. And I did this whole thing in French to make it easy on her. Although when I was there with Christer Bicklum, who arranged the whole trip for me, I was with him obviously. He did his interview in English because he doesn't speak French. I decided I was going to do mine in French to put her at ease, to see if I could still do it, see if I could understand what she was saying, which, believe it or not, I did, and I was really thrilled to do this.
You know, French is my second language, but I do speak the language fairly well. And for all the teasing I've done over the years about your Italian and Italian accent and everything, I'm really quite proud of you for pulling this out. And I mean, this is you've given me some great advice about wine travel over the years. You know, like really making sure you're digging a wine before buying it, because wine always tastes better in the presence of the winemaker. Let me tell you that if you ever have the opportunity to visit France, even if all you have is like grade school French, all you can do is simple things like maybe point at a menu and order. If you're not in Paris, because I think every French speaker that I know, or French is the second language speaker I know, has had the experience in Paris where it's a little bit rude, where you try to work in French and they answer you in English.
No.
Which I don't, in hindsight, it's just like, I don't think it's as rude as people think. It's just they think it's going to make you more comfortable to deal in their language. But when you're in the rural parts of France, when you're not in Paris, when you're in the Dordogne, when you're in Bordeaux, when you're in Lyon, when you're in Beaune, if you can make an effort to try to speak the language, that currency goes very far.
I'm also going to tell you, Dany Rolland's English is perfect. Like, there was no reason why I couldn't have done it in English.
Why didn't you do it in English? Because I had to translate it, and we had to get it recorded.
I wanted to try to do it in French, and I believe that people in their native language will speak more freely than they will when they're trying to figure out words in English or in.
I actually agree with you on that, and it's a constant struggle I have when I I'm speaking in French because there are certain expressions that you and I use on the regular basis that literally don't translate, and you can kind of find like an equivalent in the other language, but it's never quite the exact same. So without further ado, here is and a special thanks to Julia Rolland for recording the translation of doing the voice of Dany Rolland in this interview. And
no relation, right? Julie Rolland, Michel Rolland.
I didn't even realize that because her name is spelled so differently.
That's hilarious.
I am Dany Rolland. Je suis originaire de...
I am originally from Dordogne, a department close to Gironde, and I was a medical student in Bordeaux in the 60s and 70s. And in 1968, we didn't have medical exams because of the May 1968 revolution. So, to not lose my next year, I had many pharmacist friends who were studying a discipline I did not know, enology.
So Dany ends up working in wine instead of pharmacy, and it was just it was such a romantic way that she looks at wine and talks about it and meeting Michel, which was just people don't know this, but I'm a romantic at heart, and I was melting listening to this story.
On peut prendre une pomme, elle va faire du cidre, mais ça n'a rien de noble.
We can take an apple and make cider, but it's not noble. The grape has a whole history. It was more interesting for me to understand this chemistry, these physics, the biology, the microchemistry, the microbiology. Even more interesting than tasting the wine or tasting the final product, but to understand the process.
Les process qu'il y avait in between.
All right, Michael. So you and I get a chance to talk to a lot of winemakers. We get approached by pitches all the time. Why did you choose to do this interview? It's clearly like the fact that you chose to do this interview in French. There's a significance to it. What is like the big deal here? What's the hook here?
So Dany is a big deal. Like Michel Rolland is still a big deal. Like they are still. I'm going to say it again. They are a big deal in Bordeaux. I got to taste at 4 different wine consultants. The one we missed is now considered the top wine consultant now in Bordeaux. Eric something, I can't remember, Bonnet or something like that. But Michel is definitely like number 2 these days. And I'm sure they still think they're number 1. But according to I read a lot of publications that said, there's a guy now who really anyway. If we ever got an interview with him, I would take it. But Dany Rolland, she was so nice. We walked into the winery. We walked into Chateau Fontenil, and we were just there to taste the 20, 21, and 22 vintage. She had everything from the 22 all the way down to the 2008 or 6 or something. You're having a 10.
Yeah.
That I bought.
This is so in the sweet spot for me. Like this is exactly where I love wine. Like tannin soft, fruit good. Like there's very little secondary. This is gorgeous wine.
I bought this. I bought 4 bottles from her. I was like, I want to buy this wine. It was not too expensive. You would think that Michel Rolland's wines would be, off the chart. It's from Fronsac, so it's not a region that's well known. And I want to say it was €20 like for this bottle.
Nice.
And
it's like
it was
$30,
and it was like all up and down the line. They were all the same price, and I was like, wow, these are just wonderful wines. And then they had a white wine, and so I said I really would like to talk with you. Can and she says, you know what, we're having lunch in a few days when you come taste. Why don't we do it then? And she is so gracious as a host. The wines that she opened for lunch. The wines that she poured were so generous and so wonderful. Like she started with her white and a Clos de Sarp.
Okay.
21. 21, not a great vintage in Bordeaux.
Okay.
But the Clos de Sarp was so lovely, and her white wine was so good. And I tried the 22 Clos de Sarp. Those two wines, if I'm just telling you, if anybody gets a chance to buy either of them, you're not going to do badly in any way, shape, or form. They're so good. And then she decided that her theme was the number 5. So she opened up a Val de Flor from Mendoza, which is one of her projects with Michel in Malbec, 2005. Gorgeous. Against a Pontet Canet, 2005. And nobody thought that the Malbec was from Argentina. Everybody on the table was going, "Oh, where from Bordeaux is it from?" Blah blah blah. Amazing. And then she went to 95 for the second course, which was a Chateau Pape Clement and a Mouton Rothschild. 95. This is lunch. Then Krister's birth year was 1979. So she opened up a Chateau Palmer, 1979. And then for dessert, we had a Chateau Gilet creme de tête, 79. Her generosity, having she's just met me, she knows Krister, but her generosity was just, it was just so, I'm speechless just to have it.
I know. I love that you have that memory, and I think it's I'm not trying to pat you on the back, but this is something that's a bit of a personal philosophy for me, because it's something that is a bit of a personal pet peeve of mine when I have done some wine travel. This is, I think, just how my mother has raised me, and I hope that for anyone in Niagara that I've tasted with, you feel the same way as well. Is I never want to assume that I'm going to be treated a certain way because I go somewhere because of what I do, and I recognize that every bottle of wine that's open for me is something that could be sold to someone else, and they're choosing to do that because I'm hopefully going to be helping them with their business. And I think it's really important as wine professionals to always be a gracious guest. And I think it's amazing, because that level of hospitality that you're getting is definitely a step up. That wine list is insane. People would spend hundreds upon hundreds of dollars to go to a dinner with that wine list there. But and
lunch was delicious, by the way. The food was really good too. I'm not knocking the food or anything, but that wine list was outstanding. And that she would sit down with little old me. Bordeaux's not my thing.
But that's it, though. Is Bordeaux is? I guarantee you now, Bordeaux is going to be your thing after this.
But I mean, she sat down with me, and I went with the French, and I'm just
well. Okay,
Dany,
you know what?
If you're listening, and I know you do listen to stuff, thank you very, 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 very much. Not just for the lunch, not for the food, but for sitting down with me, and talking.
All right, well, let's get real here. So let's dive into this interview. And I did really enjoy translating it, because I got to hear the French version of this. Unfortunately, you guys listening to this are hearing the translation for it. You and I have been talking about the storm that's brewing in the wine regions that have taken their clientele for granted. We touched on that in the last episode with Wakefield, notably with California. But Bordeaux is definitely a region that's experienced a reckoning with China having abandoned the market. I've been very lucky to have had a chance to taste a lot of the Premier Grand Cru Class A wines. And the thing is, there's no way, as much as I love spending money on a good bottle of wine, there's no way in hell I'm spending $1,100, $1,200 for a bottle of Mouton or a bottle of Latour, because the wines aren't worth it. Full stop. And I'm sorry if you're spending money on those wines, you're getting ripped off. There's great wines in Bordeaux that don't cost that much, but the problem is now people look at these wineries as the flag bearers, and you don't want to set foot in the store because the security guard's wearing too nice of a suit. You're afraid to go and taste them.
That is the problem. But somebody did point out to me, and I went into a lot of wine shops, a lot of them. There is great Bordeaux that's sold between 30 and 50 euros, and nobody really thinks about those.
Well, because there's no prestige to it. You need to sell the story, right?
You do, and as I said with Wakefield, it's the story, and not all the stories are on the back label, but Bordeaux, probably pound for pound, still is offering great value, but you can't be buying their first growth.
And there's nothing wrong with that, because first growth is just the label on the bottle.
The interesting part is that how this classification system came was how much people were selling the bottles of wine for. They never looked at the soil.
Oh, that's interesting.
That was one of those moments where I was like, wow. So here we're going to talk about what the life of a winemaker in Bordeaux or France is today.
Alors, il y a plusieurs problèmes. Historiquement,
So, there are a few problems. Historically, we always thought it was important for the property and for enologues as well, because we're all in the same movement to make good wines, to try to understand the soil, to try to understand what kind you're trying to make. That is, trying to speak to the soil, to the terroir, but also be good wines. We thought with our climates, which are very different each vintage in Bordeaux compared to the New World, we thought that was the challenge, to make good wines. And today we know it is not the main challenge for a proprietor. Today you have to sell the wine. You have to sell your wine. You have to be close to your soil to understand what is best for the soil and reduce the use of what is bad for the soil and for the future. So, because there are many new challenges compared to what our parents had to deal with 30 years ago, because 30 years ago we made good wine and we sold it all the time. No wine in our history has sold at different prices to different markets. But today, we realize that we're dealing with a host of wines all over the world. And in the liquor store, when a client wants a bottle, they have so much choice that if they don't know the label, or if they don't know a bit of history about the proprietor or the family, he has no interest in buying that wine. That is to say that everything is a bit more complicated with the business plan and the communication plan, because we need to communicate much more than before to make ourselves known. So, with these new challenges, it's difficult, because we have just had, until present, a marketplace that was also interested and strong. Us, for example, we sold half of Fontenil in Premiere at the place in Bordeaux. We held the other half to always have old vintages to sell to restaurants. In particular, different importers were interested to have old vintages to drink because people today don't have the money to invest, and they don't have the place to store wines properly. So for us, it's work, and we're doing it. It's because of that we have 10 years of stock to try and sell, ready to drink.
Pour essayer de vendre des vins prêts à boire.
You and I have talked quite a bit about the selling side of wine, and I mean, that's obviously something of personal interest to me, like owning a wine business now, and, selling stuff is now my job, working in marketing. And I do think that it is something that most of the wine press doesn't spend enough time talking about. And I think it is one of the reasons why wine journalism has disintegrated to the point that it is right now is, we're at a point where brands that have money can put influencers in their pocket. And, don't get me wrong, I've said on this podcast before, I am a fan of good influencer marketing. And influencer marketing does exist out there. But, the reality is...
You have to disclose it, people.
Yeah, I mean, and that's not what we're going to touch on in this podcast. But, the problem is the ultra-premium brands have either not earmarked the time or the money or worked it into their business plan to have a marketing plan to get their story out there, right? And I've seen this happen in Niagara countless times where, a really, really great virtual label has popped up and then languished because passion doesn't sell wine. You still need to have a plan to sell it. None of this stuff is field of dreams. Just because you have a winery in Bordeaux doesn't mean that if you build it, they will come. And that's something that everyone who's selling wine needs to think about. You need to have a plan to get your bottles in people's hands.
The thing about Bordeaux is they're still stuck with négociants, and they do not see a way out of it. Like, when I'm in Italy, I just ask the producer who their agent is. And they either know or I can look it up on an iPad. In Bordeaux, it's still the role of the négociant. And the problem with the négociant is that they were buying based on China. They were buying lots and lots of futures.
Whoa. Can we just take like a quick step back, because I don't want to take the audience for granted. And this is something where actually I think I need a little bit of knowledge as well. Is so as the ADX Wine Company, I have an agent.
Correct.
My agent is Les Grappes. If anyone is looking to purchase some ADX wines, reach out to JB and Matthew from Les Grappes. But the thing is, doing a direct translation, I would call Matthew and JB my négociant, because they're buying the wine from me and they're putting it in the hands of restaurants. But because we're in Ontario, they can't mark up the wines however they want. So it's my understanding that a négociant in France is the same or similar to having an agent in Canada. Is that correct? Or can you clarify that?
It's a little bit different. So you go to the Place de Bordeaux, or the Place de Bordeaux is where they sell the wine. The négociant buys the wine, and then he sells it around the world. So yes, it is kind of an agent, but you can have 2 or 3 different négociants dealing with the same wine.
Why would you have multiple négociants?
Because they could have different places where they go. Some go to Canada, some go to South America, some go to China.
Okay, that makes sense.
So they go to different places. Some people don't like that because they don't want to, they don't want their wine to be $1 less here, and then you move to a different négociant, or it's a mess. And the problem now with the négociants is they also saw big dollar signs from China, right? And then they started stockpiling wines in vintages that they thought they could sell. And the problem is, now that China's gone, nope, we're not buying wine anymore, these négociants are probably looking at going broke because they're sitting on a whole bunch of stock that they can't sell. And the other big problem is, Bordeaux's regular markets have all dried up because, 1, the price is too expensive,
yep.
and 2, you haven't been around for 10 years to show us your wines.
Yep.
So guess what? We've moved on.
Yep.
We've moved on to Italy, to Spain, to Portugal. We're buying more, Super Tuscan wines than we're buying Bordeaux because it just became too expensive, and you never came around.
And you can get the top level Super Tuscans for a few $100. Like a bottle of Sazakia is $300, which I realize is a lot of money. But next to a Premier Grand Cru Class A Left Bank Bordeaux, it's a bargain. And honestly, I think some of those wines, like the Super Tuscans, are still actually worth the money. They're a treat.
I think I saw a Tignanello this year at $199 in the LCBO's guide.
Yep.
And I was like, wow, that's Tig's the most recognized Italian wine in the world.
It's too bad. I think Ornelas is better.
I'm just saying. Tig is the most
All right, so bringing it back here, you said that like the problem with Bordeaux is the négociant, right?
Yeah. And so I asked Dany about the role of the négociant, and is it sustainable going forward?
Comment voyez-vous le rôle de négociateur à l'avenir? Est-ce qu'il est durable ou Bordeaux doit-il trouver une autre voie?
Alors, c'est une question très difficile parce que Bordeaux a une histoire.
That's a difficult question, because Bordeaux has a history, a deep history that is large, and Bordeaux has a history. Bordeaux has a terroir. Bordeaux has a climate. I don't see a day in the future changing and making wines very, very different. We can play, with some varieties maybe, but I think that us and our terroirs, with the clay and the limestone, we don't have any problems with global warming. We have more problems with the rain, with the cold years, than with global warming. But it's true that there's still a question. Does the whole world like the taste of Bordeaux? Do people have the culture of waiting for wine? We had lunch. We drink wines that were mature and showed their evolution in the bottle. They were ready to drink. With potential, there we go. This has been our idea for a long time. The great vintages and the good vintages. There are vintages with a lot of sun, where we have ripe fruit, balanced fruit, and by balance, I mean to say good pH, good ripe tannins, to have balance. It's important for a wine to have balance, and so, when we have that, they are ready to drink, and we can enjoy a bottle of young wine with sausages, pâté, casse-croûte, what we call in the morning pizza. And there you go, we can enjoy that. But on the other hand, a vintage that has potential can also age. It will bring us more, something charming with finesse and complexity. And so we can have an idea for collectors and for people who know about old wine that they will be good. But I think today we aren't asking for finesse. So the 2022, you and me find it very good. But will new drinkers, people who want us to change our style, is this the kind of wine they'll love? I'm afraid they like very light wines.
Plutôt les vins très light.
You know, I'm always excited to hear winemakers in well-established regions because I think it's one of the misnomers as wine lovers, wine journalists, wine enthusiasts, is that certain styles, certain traditions are ingrained in stone, when the reality is the wine industry does actually shift. And, you know, there's certain parts of it that don't. Glass bottles haven't shifted in like well over 100 years.
They tried Tetra Pak. That was a dumb idea.
That's it. The labels, I mean, for the most part, you know, a classic label. And the thing is, I've got a soft spot for a label that hasn't been redesigned in whatever. But I remember my trip to Bordeaux in 2013 where, you know, I hit it off with Guy Mesnil at Chateau La Rose, spelled with a Z. And we got along really well. So I wasn't being a shit just because I want to make sure it's clear on this podcast. I wasn't being disrespectful when I asked him this question, where I was just like, well, why don't you put some of your wine in screw cap? And like, I just listening to Dany Rolland talk about her change in styles reminded me of Guy talking about I would put wine in screw cap if I could, but the market wouldn't buy it. So it's interesting to hear, you know, and listen to Pascal Marchand in Burgundy talking about making wines that are more approachable, younger, while still finding that balance of making cellar-worthy wine so that they're appeasing people like us. So I think it's cool to hear like a really established winemaker and a respected winemaker in Bordeaux talk about evolving their style. Do you have any, like, how did you react when you heard that?
I am still shocked that they don't want to do screw cap. They've done the studies. They know that it's the better closure, but
it's not as much fun. I get it.
I get it. It's not as romantic. It's not as much fun.
Okay, can I? I just want to put something out there on the tape.
But I mean, they're lower level wines. They can put under screw cap.
Okay, but I think people will sort of get this. Is it's just like I bought an Audi A4 last year
under screw cap?
No, but, you know, I went and I bought a luxury car because it makes me feel good, and I enjoy it, and I love being behind the wheel of it. And, like, the thing is, I love cars. I love cars a lot. But you know what? I could have went and bought a Honda Civic, or, you know, I could have bought a Toyota Sienna minivan.
Or a Hyundai Sonata.
No, never Korean cars. So, sorry if you're a fan of Korean cars, just not in this house. But, like, the thing is, I could have chosen to buy something that was cheaper. I could have bought something that's cheaper and more practical. Like, I could have bought that Toyota Sienna, and it would have checked all the boxes that Audi A4 buys, but it's just point blank not as fun. And the thing is, like, opening a cork on a bottle still has a romantic notion to it. So, like, I get it. My head is telling me screw caps for all. Screw caps for one, screw caps for all. But my heart is telling me cork. I
would still, you know, look, Wakefield puts all their wines under screw cap. We talked to them 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Everything from, you know, their Legacy, which is their high end, to the Promised Land, which is as low as you get. But I mean, look, I asked Dany what the future of Bordeaux was, and this is what she had to say.
Qu'est-ce que c'est le futur de Bordeaux?
Mais oui, c'est la question qui suit la précédente.
Yes, that's the logical question. I think Bordeaux has such a history and terroir, and is a force with its families, with people who are interested, who work in Bordeaux. I think that Bordeaux cannot continue to exist. So the future that will be for us to find in a way that is convincing, that we are not necessarily the best, but we are a region that is worth paying attention to, with all its small properties and diversity. and more, Bordeaux is putting in great effort in ecology in many of the domains. I think that Bordeaux is going to keep its spirit, because we will not save Bordeaux making wines with no alcohol. That's not the solution. To make only rosé, that's not the solution. So you need to conserve Bordeaux's spirit. And I think that it's a lot of work. We need to question ourselves. We need to travel. We need to taste. We need to communicate. We need to bring youth into our image, because that's what's missing today, a younger generation. But this younger generation, they don't drink a lot of wine, and not just Bordeaux. And that's what you need, because when they come from a viticulture family and they have history in mind. But the new consumers, they are turning to things more exotic, or beer, or sodas, or... And this culture we need to educate as well. It's a form of education. But for that, it's communication, it's self-sacrifice. And our problem in our small properties is that we can't do everything. We can't be in the vineyard doing accounts and then traveling to sell and to communicate. It's all very complicated. So it's true that we need support and help. We do the maximum, but it's not so simple as being a human of the soil and a human of communication. At the property in Bordeaux, it has helped us. We have sold half or 70% of our production at the property, and that's immediate money, even before being in the bottle. It's the principle of en primeur. So, it was a significant financial potential that allowed us to develop and do other things. Well, today the market is a bit, we say, drained. That is to say that today, since 2023, and even in 2022, they have bought less and less. And I don't think that 2024 will be the year that will bring the problem back up, because they also have a lot of stock. And they have trouble talking about wines. I was saying it at lunch, when you have 20 negociants selling the same wine, why would they put more money into advertising this vintage than another? Especially since sometimes it's their competitor who makes the sale. So maybe it would work better with exclusives. But we know that exclusivity is also a straitjacket exclusivity, because it works. Because if it works, it works. But otherwise, you're out of market. So all of this questioning, we need to talk more. Maybe we also need to hear more from people who see our lands, our small businesses, our families, our history. I don't know. We need to find arguments. There you go.
Il faut trouver des arguments. Voilà.
So after you did this interview, you reached out to me and you said, I think I might have gotten in trouble, but I'm not sure. And Christer Bicklem said, wow, you asked a pretty ballsy question. Can we frame this like what was going on here before we set up? I want to make sure we set up this question properly, because I actually I understood the question and where it was coming from a little bit, but I just want to hear it in your words.
So ever since there's probably two or three people that I think everybody who's ever been into wine has heard of. Robert Mondavi.
Okay.
Robert Parker.
Yep.
Michel Rolland. If you have been in wine in any way, shape, or form in the last 15 to 20 years, you've heard those names, and good, bad, or indifferent. But usually you've heard them, many people hear Robert Mondavi and they become wistful of the days of Robert Mondavi and how he made deals and he was such a wonderful man. I never met him, you never met him, but anybody I've ever known who's met him said he was such a great guy, and he did so much for the wine, not just the wines of California, but the wine world in general. Boom. Robert Parker. You hear Robert Parker's name. At the time, he was the biggest. We will probably never see another Robert Parker who will influence wine in the way that he did, for better or for worse.
No, it is. It's just a fact.
These days, people see it probably for worse, but at the time, people were seeing it for better. Oh, Robert Parker, he brings the 100-point scale. He makes wine accessible to people because, everybody understands 100 points, why you couldn't understand a 20-point system and just times it by 5 and make 100 points, I don't know. But he made wine an essay.
Yep.
Basically, you're getting 94 points, and that's what you're going to get. And as we've moved forward, we've realized that maybe his way of winemaking or his influence was not as good, and we're seeing a pushback against it.
I mean, trends change, right? But like what you're saying is correct. Like Robert Parker, I think is he's definitely like an avatar for that point in time. Just the explosion of mass media, the real move towards globalization in the 80s and the 90s, and the influence that he had, where he essentially created a standard for red wine making on this planet.
Correct. Especially in California, in Australia, and pretty much everywhere.
Yeah, so that brings us to Michel.
So now we get to Michel Rolland. And his name somehow became almost synonymous with Robert Parker because he was making those kinds of wines as well. And if you think back, there are a number of movies that his name came up in. Mondovino was actually one of the big ones that came up. And there's a few other ones where his name and people said he was ruining wine and blah blah blah. I disagree with that. He was just doing what he thought was right at the time. And
I would even push back that Parker ruined wine because that's a hindsight thing. Like the
Correct.
thing is, he had the influence and wineries followed suit. And they chose to follow suit.
But now I give you Exhibit A. What's in your glass now is from 2010, which is 15 years ago. Mm-hmm. That's probably somewhere in the sweet spot of where Michel Rolland is making wine, and his name is huge at this time. Is this over oaked?
This is beautifully elegant. Like, this is when I talk about wines that I like to drink, that I really, really like to drink. This is it. It's cassis, like it's blackcurrant, it's violet. The tannin is so soft and short. It's literally just like it's caressing the front of my palate. The wine's rolling off the back palate. The finish is long and floral and luscious. It's filling my wine almost to the back of my cheeks, but not completely to the point where like I feel like my teeth are coated with tannin. And this is a wine where I'm almost regretting that we're opening it during the podcast right now because I bought some beautiful strip loins. And I know that I'm not a big fan about talking about wine and food pairings these days. But I know for me, this is what would go with a great piece of red meat.
And so this shows that Michel Rolland knows how to make wine. Obviously, he knows. That's why you become as big a name as you did. What I asked Dany, and now we're in the, as you said, we're now in the hindsight category, right? We're now looking way back. We're in the Wayback Machine, looking back at these movies that came out that badmouthed her husband. And what I wanted to know is how she dealt with that. Not just at the time, but maybe in hindsight now. What do you think of it?
Maintenant, je pose une question qui est un peu personnelle. Si vous voulez pas répondre, je comprends.
Pas répondre.
À un certain point, votre mari,
Oui.
Michel, est une des plus influences et peut-être, pour certains, controversielles. Figure dans le monde de vin. Comment avez-vous géré cela?
Comment j'ai géré
cela?
Alors, moi je connais Michel évidemment depuis beaucoup plus longtemps que tout le monde.
Oui.
Voilà.
So I've obviously known Michel for longer than anyone else. There you go. Michel is a hard worker who has questioned himself a lot of the time. I think he's acquired experience. He's stuck on the novice of tasting. That is to say, he tastes wine like a great athlete does balls. He's developed a taste memory and a way of concentrating to taste and to interpret, to make blends. You have to find synergy of the components. So all of this has been many years of work. And I think he's reached a point where he is the master at it, because when it comes to blending, it is still, and I think that well as always, when someone succeeds, especially at the time when we succeeded, which was the era of the 80s, the beginning of Mr. Parker, who was also, there was the 80s. It was the age of France. He was controversial for his tastes. Well, he called the shots on the market. I think that when you start to have a certain influence, you are inevitably criticized. You're inevitably judged. You are inevitably envied. So I don't find that weird. Michel is a man of the land to begin with. A real one. A true Gascon. We Gascony of the south of France. A true Gascon. We Gascons. Gascony is the south of France, okay? There are people who talk a lot. Yes, who talk loudly. Yes, who are like you, well-fleshed, who are Epicureans, but who also express themselves. And so Michel is a bit like that. He's a bit, he's a real Gascon, who likes to talk, so sometimes, obviously, it goes down more or less well. But on the other hand, he also has a quality. It's his great discretion when he tastes, when he travels. Everything he does on a property, everything is kept to himself. What I mean is that he never talks about what he does in this or that property in order to maintain his integrity. And so, Michel and I, we are very complementary because he chose this direction of consulting. I stayed much more to manage the laboratory, the family, to manage his schedule. We couldn't do the same thing. A couple who traveled so much on each side of the other, who had done the same thing, it was not possible. So, but on the other hand, we taste a lot together. We are very, very on the same wavelength. Often, we don't necessarily have the same tastes, but we manage to find a compromise between our two sensibilities. But that's normal. Between a man and the woman, there is. But, I don't know how to taste like him. That is to say, 200 components on the table, and he has to make 3 or 4 assemblage. He tastes. He will find the synergies right away, but that's training. I haven't done it much. 20 components are fine for me, but beyond that, for me, it's superhuman, you know? So because we didn't choose the same direction, you know, he's done nothing but this all of his life. So what's more, he's a man of the land because he's the first, after all, to have walked the vineyards, trying to understand why a vine was better like that, why it had to be a higher density, the exposures, the grape varieties, taste in the grape. He was still the first one to do that. So we can't say that he's just a laboratory man, not at all. He's a man of the field, and who afterwards found a way to express himself through tasting. So it's true he has a character, not necessarily easy, but he's a good man. He has a big heart, and I'm not one upset by films like Montevino. I would have broken his jaw. Michel said, let's talk about it. It doesn't matter. I was very, very upset, much more than him. We worked. How can I put this a little, obviously in the spotlight, since that's his job, me more in the shadows. A bit like a eminence grise. You know, the eminence grise is the one who every king or always has a grey eminence. It is someone who is behind, who thinks, who proposes, who often disposes. And the other way around too. But the notion of the grey eminence, it's a little bit more different. It's someone who's in the shadows, but who makes his contribution. There you go. We tried especially, which is very important, as being from a family, all the same. So all of the wine growers for a long time, we tried especially to educate our daughters, who they did not do enology, but who love the vine, our wines, our work very much. We introduced them to wine very young. And one of them is more into accounting and numbers, but she handles all the business. The other is a graphic designer, but both of them love wine and want to keep our heritage, let's say, in the family. So that's important. I think we didn't direct them towards enology because it was perhaps a little difficult for them with the parents. They had to express themselves, and then, well, they had seen our life where we traveled a lot. We were never there. So they chose other careers. As is often the case, children don't want to do what their parents do. But on the other hand, we managed to make them love wine, love family, love what we do, and they are both very involved. And that is our great success, to know how to pass it on. Because I believe that today, one of our big arguments is to educate, even for wine, even for a consumer, even in a family, a child who is 10 years old, he can taste. Or at the end of a small glass, or with his finger, taste the wine that his dad will serve at the table. I believe that the future lies in education. Education in the culture of wine. And if we don't do that, we'll lose this entire generation who will have never heard of wine, who will have never been educated. And that, I believe, is the future. Educate rather than prohibit. Because today, we're surrounded by people who are prohibitionists, or with cancel culture, with woke culture, with dry January. Look, if we had dry January today, very dry, very dry. Not dry because we had Sauterne at the end. It's not dry. A lot of sugar. No, that's it. We have to try to make this wine culture a foundation, that we educate rather than prohibit, rather than saying that wine is a drug, wine is bad, wine is bad. And none of that is true. We have to educate. Communicating with people and educating. That's it.
Communiquer avec les gens et éduquer. Voilà.
Merci, Dany. J'apprécie votre temps beaucoup.
Bon, merci.
It's nice when he can get someone being vulnerable and honest, especially when they're connected to being such an influential figure. One thing that you didn't cover in the interview, that now tasting this Chateau Fontenil, that I'm wildly curious about is, like, Michel's name is connected to several Premier Grand Cru Classé wineries, some excellent wineries in California, and you would think that...
I think he was in California at the time that I recorded with his wife.
But you would think that Dany and Michel, you could sell your wine for a few more dollars. Like, this is profoundly excellent. Like this is a 4.5 star wine for me, like a hard 4.5 stars, at $30 Canadian a bottle that you purchased at the winery. I'd be curious why it's important to Michel and Dany to make their wines so accessible, to make the price point accessible.
Look, I'm sure they'd love to sell it for more. I'm positive they would. It's basically in Bordeaux. It's where you're located, right? They're not a Grand Cru Classé.
Okay, so they lost the geography lottery.
You're correct, and you're in Fronsac. And the funny part about this winery is that they were just looking for a place. They wanted to get out of Paris, blah blah blah. So they were looking for a place. This place came up, and they said we like it. And then suddenly the lady said, "Well, you know, you have to take the vineyard as well." And they're like, "Okay, you know, the winery is beautiful. The vineyards are beautiful." They really didn't want to buy a vineyard. They wanted
a place
to get away, and they ended up with a vineyard, which is, you know, it's pretty funny. But they're making some beautiful wines out of the place, and this is his home vineyard. This is where he, you know, they toil away, and they make some fabulous wines. The whites were great, the reds even better. And Dany, thank you very much. My heart goes out to Dany for answering the last question, for sitting down with me, for letting me muddle through in my crazy French, my grade 10 French.
There were a couple of questions. I'm debating whether or not I should post the raw interview on the feed for anyone curious, because there's a couple of questions in particular where you definitely did not choose the right words, and no. I could hear Dany being like, what the hell is this guy saying? And then when you got to the end of the questions, be like, oh, that's what he's saying. Yeah. But the thing is, like, this goes back to what I said at the beginning of the podcast, is, you know, this is a bit of an aside, but if you're traveling, that goodwill of trying to speak in the language is, like, Dany understood your French. I understood your French. I understood the questions that you were doing, and the goodwill goes a long way. And seeing your enthusiasm on this is great because, like, I know you and I, we do a lot of critique on this podcast. Like, we're some of the few last critics of all aspects of this industry, but to see you with like you literally are gushing about this like a kid who just went to Disney World and had a great trip, and like that enthusiasm isn't infectious. But this bottle of wine that you brought back, I think, also sticks to the advice that you give me year after year after year of like, make sure the bottle of wine's really good when you bring it home, because this wine is outstanding, and honestly, it tastes even better going with the story that went with it. So I appreciate you bringing it with you.
My biggest fear of opening this bottle
was that it was corked.
Well, cork would have been number one, but number two is goes, what the hell is this? That's my. I've told you year after year, and I'm like, I bought this bottle. I bought 4 of them. I've drank probably 2, if not 3 of them already. Everyone has been delicious. Most of them were drank in Europe. This is the one I brought home. Here we are, and you were to go, why am I drinking this?
It's cool. I think that's the one thing too, is like all wine enthusiasts do this, where we open like a bottle of wine with friends or family, and it's just like, ta-da! Nobody's liking it as much as I did. Yeah. And anyways, I think this is as good a place as any to wrap it. Like, I got a lot out of this interview. I thought it was a really, really cool interview. I really love these interviews that and if you're listening to this podcast, we'd love to hear what you think. André at AndréWineReview.ca, Michael at MichaelPincusWineReview.com.
And if you want to hear the raw interview,
I'll put it up in the feed.
Put it up, and then or tell us you want to hear it, and we'd love to. We'll put it up. What the heck? I've already made myself embarrassed myself with it.
You didn't embarrass yourself.
Oh, good.
No, I don't want you to feel okay. I don't want you to feel it. No, you did great. You did great.
Okay.
So, anyways, André Prue, AndréWineReview.ca. Love that we keep talking about where the wine industry is going. These interviews, for me, this is what I find interesting. Email me if you don't want us to do these anymore. I'll probably tell you where to go, but I mean, we do take all the feedback on this podcast quite seriously, so we love hearing from you.
We're doing a lot more interviews, and I think hopefully you'll be very excited by the interviews that were done in Italy and France. And I know that I'm going to start giving you some homework, André, because
I'm ready for it.
And the reason is, I was the one who did the interview. Sometimes it's interesting to come at it from get somebody else's point of view, where I go, you tell me what you got out of that interview.
We'll do that. We'll do that for next one.
All right. André, you've already done your little extra, so it's my turn. I am Michael Pincus of MichaelPincusWineReview.com, the grape guy on most social media. One more time, I have to gush and thank Dany Rolland for the wines, but especially for the interview. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And good night. This is a damn good wine.
So good.
Thanks for listening. Please subscribe to Two Guys Talking Wine on iTunes.
Two Guys Talking Wine is produced by Adam Duran and Ken Little.